Hello, and welcome to A Sound Constitution, here on CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics that are important to our community. This year's team is made up of 7 third-year VIU nursing students. Our goal is to demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable sources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes on our Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify pages. We want to remind our listeners that the information provided in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Spotify at A Sound Constitution, CHLY 101.7 FM, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com.
We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we were on the unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw people, with a broadcasting range that overlaps the Kwatsan and Sulaiman territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Snuneymuxw people and with the intention to increase awareness about truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding reconciliation, protocol, and land acknowledgements can be found in our show notes.
I squeal. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Sound Constitution. Since the COVID pandemic, vaccines have been a hot topic of debate on its effectiveness, safety, and overall development. Because of this, many of us have talked, and maybe even argued with each other, about our beliefs and opinions of the vaccines. But what is a vaccine? How many types are there? How did we develop vaccines in the first place? In this episode of A Sound Constitution, we will cover this and more. Before we get started, however, because of the nature of this topic, I would like to once again remind our listeners that the goal of this episode is to provide accurate information to our community. This episode is not a means to tell our listeners that their beliefs are wrong or misguided. Because there is a lot of information out there that conflicts with each other, this may lead to a variety of opinions from the subject that can vary from person to person. That being said, however, everyone at A Sound Constitution would encourage our listeners to come into this episode with an open mind, as there may be some things we talk about today that you may not have known before. I know I learned a couple things myself today. With that being said, let's get started.
Now that we've covered a quick overview of what we plan to explore with you this episode, we wanted to take the conversation beyond the studio and hear directly from the community. What do people actually think about vaccines? To find out, we headed out around campus and asked people what they already know about vaccines, how they feel about the topic, and what their understanding is of different vaccine types. We also asked if they had any questions about vaccines, so we could do our best to address them later in the episode. And stick around afterwards because we'll be diving into the history of vaccines and exploring how they became the tools we use today to protect public health.
Hey you!
Who, me?
Yeah, you! We want to hear what you have to say because
Your opinion matters!
Hello again. So as mentioned, I had the opportunity to talk to members of our community about vaccines and how they view them. The idea behind this segment is to get an insight of our community's beliefs and opinions on vaccinations. While many were not willing to talk about a sensitive subject like this, and honestly, I can't blame them, I did have an opportunity to talk to a group of students on Vancouver Island University campus about this topic. I had first asked them about their opinions of vaccines, and here's a couple comments that were made.
It's like, do you get them and now you can't get the virus?
Similarly, here's what another student had to say.
I grew up in a very pro-medical family. My dad has had chronic illness, so I've always been very pro-vaccine, pro-medical intervention, because I've seen it work with my dad, and they're not going to stick things in your body that's going to harm you personally. So,
as we can see, the current consensus of vaccines have been rather positive. That being said, one of the individuals also had this to say about vaccines.
If it helps me not get sick and die, I will happily vaccinate myself. And however much that needs to happen, that will happen.
This is an interesting comment because it helps give you the idea of why people tend to get vaccines. Many people often tend to get vaccines not just for themselves, but for others around them. As a personal example, I decided to get the COVID vaccines not because I didn't want to get sick, but because I didn't want to get my only grandparent that I have left sick from it as well. I also took these shots because, and I may be showing my age here, I decided back in the early 2010s to not get the H1N1 vaccine that was offered to me in grade 10 because, and I quote myself here, "The pandemic is nearly gone. What are the chances I will get it now?" Well, listeners, it was days after I declined the vaccine that I was tested positive for H1N1. So personally, even if I didn't get COVID this time around, I had enough of an experience from H1N1 to not make the same choice I made back then. I bring my experience up here because I wish to highlight that everyone has different reasons to get vaccinated or not. Speaking of, I also asked these students about their knowledge on booster vaccines and how they felt about them, and here's what they had to say about them.
Pretty sure I have a bunch of boosters for stuff.
Yeah.
My mom vaccinated me when I was like in elementary, so I don't remember a lot of this stuff. But I'm pretty sure like COVID and stuff that made a lot of people aware about what boosters are.
For a lot of us, our earliest experience with vaccines, or at least from memory, were from our early school years. I remember getting a vaccine in high school, although I could not tell you which one it was. But the school had a tradition at the time to have all the grade 12 students go around and slap or punch the arms of the new kids, since all the grade 9s that were fresh to high school needed the shot. And they were very obvious to see as we all had very colorful band-aids on our arms. Thankfully, the new principal that year shut that down very quickly. However, to circle back to the original comment, I'm sure many of us have had experiences with vaccines as kids, but had no idea what they were for. Probably felt forced to take them when we were kids at the time, right? So maybe this could attribute to the varying opinions on vaccines as well. On the topic of booster shots, however, while I don't believe that there are any statistics to prove the statement that was made about whether or not booster shots were made more aware because of the COVID pandemic, on a personal note, I would like to believe this because I had no idea about booster shots, or at the very least, how many there were until COVID came around. So whether that may or may not be true in your case, I hope that such events, such as COVID, would encourage people to look into boosters as an option to help prevent the spread of disease in your home and community. Staying on the topic of COVID, however, I had also inquired to these students about what their knowledge about what mRNA is, as well as their opinion on mRNA vaccines. And here's what was said about that.
It would be... Is it nucleus? Is nucleus to it? Yeah, okay. Because it's just to tell your proteins what RNAs make.
And they're not too far off about mRNA. But as much as I would like to talk about that right now, we do have a segment later this episode that will cover the details about what mRNA is and what mRNA vaccines do. But the important thing here to know is that mRNA is produced in the nucleus of our cells and is later transcribed into proteins when coming into contact with ribosomes, which is then sent around our body for whatever specific needs that the protein was made for. That being said, mRNA vaccines have caused major debates on whether or not it is safe for use. So as I've asked about vaccines earlier, I asked these individuals about what their opinion of these new types of vaccines that have been recently introduced are. And here's what some people have to say about that.
It doesn't bother me. It stabbed me 8 times. I got every single COVID booster. I got the original one, and then every year they topped up. I've always gotten it. I live in an immunocompromised family, so...
Oh, yeah, so...
I'm immunocompromised, my dad is, my mom is, so we're always just like, okay, all the vaccines. Making sure that we're not getting sick. And, I know for when I got COVID, it was not fun, but my dad had to go to the hospital for it, and he was 4 times vaccinated, so...
On the other hand, there was another student that had a bit of a different opinion about these vaccines.
I didn't get the COVID shots because, one, my family generally is very healthy, and we don't associate with immunocompromised people much, and when we do, we're quite careful around them, of course, respecting their wishes and whatnot.
First off, I was rather happy to bump into this individual, since many of those you have heard from already have all been more on the positive side of this subject. While I may not completely agree with them, it is very nice to hear an opposing opinion on these things. And maybe it is because of my curious mind needing to hear every side of the story. One thing to point out is that this person mentioned that they try not to associate themselves with immunocompromised persons as much as possible because of their decision. So I must say, thank you to this individual for being mindful of others around them, regardless of their decision to have the vaccine or not. It's similar to the reason why I took the COVID vaccine for my grandfather, so it's comforting to hear that there are those out there who are doing their part to keep these people safe. I would also encourage those who are listening and may not be vaccinated for things such as COVID or influenza to keep their distance from immunocompromised individuals as much as they can, as they have very little options for vaccinations, if any at all. Those who are immunocompromised often need more booster shots to keep up with the prevention of acquiring diseases, but they also have a higher chance of complications with vaccines that the average person, such as you and I, may experience. But what did this individual think about the vaccines themselves? So let's hear what they had to say about that.
But we didn't get it because we believed that there wasn't enough testing, and because they were using it wasn't quite a vaccine in the same way that it was previously. It was a little bit spooky because I feel like we don't quite have enough knowledge and testing around tweaking the genome to really be able to do that. And also because I think that it's your body's creating the spike proteins, which act almost in the same way that a traditional vaccine would, so it's almost like your body fighting itself in a way, in my opinion.
As I said earlier, while I may not agree with this perspective, I can completely understand why. Considering how fast the COVID pandemic occurred, as well as how fast the vaccines were developed, I can see why some people may have a hard time trusting these new types of vaccinations. Thankfully, Trevor and Kira will be covering the topic of COVID vaccines as well as what they do later this episode as well. I also want to point out that it is really great to hear the opposing views on this subject as well, as it shows how diverse and dynamic our community is when it comes to these matters. I also want to remind you that when getting a vaccine or any of these booster shots, it is your choice to make. Don't let anyone else tell you what you should and should do. It is your body after all, and who knows it better than you do. And that is all I have for the interviews this week. But before I send you off to the next segment, I wanted to thank everyone who participated and agreed to have their voice in this episode for their participation. I hope this segment helped gain some insight about how our community feels about vaccines, and once again, if you have any further questions about vaccines and their safety, to please talk to your primary healthcare provider for further details. Once again, my name is Broyden, and thank you so much for listening.
Thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts with us. It's great hearing those perspectives from around our campus community. It's always interesting to hear the range of perspectives and levels of knowledge people have about various topics such as vaccines, and our community clearly has a mix of knowledge, questions, and experiences when it comes to vaccines. Now that we've heard from the community, let's take a step back and look at where vaccines actually began. There's still a lot of curiosity and discussion around this topic, and understanding the history behind vaccines can really help put things into perspective. So next, we're going to rewind the clock and take a look at the history of vaccines, how they were first discovered, and how they've evolved into the tools we rely on today to protect public health.
Vaccines have saved more human lives than any other medical intervention in history. We now take a look at how that occurred. Currently, when people think of vaccines, most of us think of getting a needle in our arms, a shot. The story of vaccines starts well before where we find ourselves today. The story of vaccination begins with variolation. As early as the 1400s in Africa and Asia, the risky practice of introducing healthy individuals intentionally to contaminated material from those infected with smallpox began. This contaminated material was either inhaled or introduced through cuts. Variolation was used in an attempt to protect people from later smallpox infections by instead infecting people with what was thought to be a smaller, more controlled amount of smallpox. Many people did not survive this practice, but for those that did, they would never become ill with smallpox again. In 1721, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu brought variolation to Europe after observing its practice in Turkey. Within the century, many advances were made in the treatment of smallpox. Many of us have heard the story of the English doctor Edward Jenner and how he created the world's first smallpox vaccine in 1796. Dr. Jenner inoculated 8-year-old James Phipps with matter from a cowpox lesion on the hand of a milkmaid. 2 months later, Jenner inoculated Phipps with human smallpox. Phipps remained in perfect health, and the term vaccine was later coined, taken from vacca, the Latin word for cow. But history is rarely so straightforward, and the full story is often far more interesting. Variolation, as we have seen, had been practiced for centuries before Jenner. So too, 2 decades earlier, had someone figured out that a cowpox infection could protect someone from smallpox. Jenner received fame and fortune, while Benjamin Jesty, the first vaccinator, was vilified. Jesty had contracted smallpox in his youth, and he knew that somehow milkmaids never became infected with smallpox. He connected the dots. Using pus from a lesion on a cow's udder and a stocking needle, Jesty introduced his wife and 2 sons to cowpox. His wife became very ill, although eventually recovered. His sons were left largely unharmed. Later attempts to infect his sons with smallpox proved unsuccessful. They were immune. Due to the harm caused to his wife, Jesty was vilified by his peers. Jenner, it is said, heard of Jesty's experiment and repeated it himself on Phipps and 23 other children. Jenner was recognized by his colleagues and the King of England. Jesty was largely forgotten about for hundreds of years. 89 years after the smallpox vaccine, humans had developed their second, this time for rabies. While it took 89 years between the first and second human vaccines, the following 89 years would see vaccine development skyrocket, with an additional 18 diseases having vaccines created. Our total climbed to 20. In 1980, one of the greatest feats of medicine was announced. Due to global vaccination efforts, the World Health Organization declared smallpox to be eradicated. Smallpox remains the only disease to carry this distinction. Vaccination efforts did not stop here, however. Today, there are vaccines available for over 30 life-threatening diseases. The work of vaccination promotion will seemingly never end. The technology that we have to treat infectious diseases has continued to improve, as seen with the first developed and approved mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. Scientists continue to innovate for the betterment of humanity. It is up to us to believe in the science.
Hey, still there? Just checking. If you're just tuning in, thank you and welcome for joining us for another episode of A Sound Constitution presented on CHLY 101.7 FM. So far in this episode, we have covered community knowledge of vaccines with some interviews from the VIU campus, and we've also heard from Trevor covering an in-depth history of vaccines. I hope you've learned something new about how vaccines came to be. I also want to say thank you to Trevor for providing us with that information. We still have more on the way, however. Coming up next, we have Kira and Trevor collaborating together to talk about what vaccines are. So let's have a listen to what they have to say, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I will.
I'm Trevor.
And I'm Kira.
Today we're going to be exploring all things vaccination and immunization.
What are vaccines?
How do they work?
And why do we need so many injections?
Stay tuned as we will answer all of these questions and more. Let's dive in.
So Trevor, can you tell me what a vaccine is?
Definitely. Most of us have plenty of experience receiving vaccines, often starting before we even roll over for the first time as infants. Given how common they are, we might not realize just how complex vaccines are. Essentially, a vaccine is designed to introduce a piece of either bacteria or virus into our bodies, and these pieces are called antigens.
Isn't it dangerous to put these antigens into our bodies? What even is an antigen?
That's a great question. It can sound a little scary at first, like you're being infected with different diseases when you get a vaccine, but that isn't really the case. We'll discuss later the different types of vaccines that are available, but none of them introduce a full-strength dose of any pathogen into your body. What vaccines do is stimulate an immune response. No matter what vaccine you receive, it will contain antigens for a specific pathogen or pathogens. Antigens are usually proteins or sugars, and they're found on the outside of things like cells or viruses. Each has a unique shape that your immune system can read, somewhat like a name tag, to know whether it belongs in your body or not.
After our immune system is exposed to the antigens from a vaccine, that's when the process of immunization really begins. You can think of the term vaccination as the act of being given a vaccine. Most are given by injection, although some are given by a nasal spray or through the mouth. Immunization, by contrast, is the process and result of your immune system giving you protection against the disease the vaccine is designed to prevent. That's immunity.
In simple terms, the immune system is a complex network of cells, tissues, and organs that help prevent diseases and keep us healthy. Our bodies produce antibodies and memory cells to fight infections and provide quicker protection against future infections. Antibodies are proteins that attach to harmful bacteria or viruses and can help to remove them from the body. If we encounter that virus or bacteria again, memory cells quickly produce more antibodies to help remove it from our body faster.
This same process happens when we are given a vaccine. Instead of being exposed to the antigens of infectious bacteria or viruses naturally, vaccines provide these antigens in a safe and predictable manner.
That's a great thing to remember. Vaccines are extremely safe and have saved the lives of millions of people. Canada has a very strong vaccine safety surveillance system in place, which includes the healthcare professionals providing vaccinations, provincial, territorial, and federal public health units, as well as vaccine manufacturers. If anything were to go wrong, healthcare providers report any unusual or serious events after vaccination to their local public health unit. After further investigation, this information is sent to provincial and territorial public health units, and then to the Public Health Agency of Canada. In collaboration with information from other countries and with the manufacturers, these systems work to ensure the safety of vaccines.
This isn't to say that you won't have any reaction after receiving a vaccine, as most of us have a sore arm or pain at the injection site. After being vaccinated, it's common to have these temporary side effects. They usually last from a few hours to a few days after vaccination. This is the body's natural response, as it's working hard to build immunity against the disease. Most side effects don't disrupt daily activities.
Some common side effects include redness or swelling at the injection site. Some other general symptoms you may experience include chills, fatigue, joint pain, headaches, and mild fevers. These usually aren't anything to worry about and will go away within a few days. Children may be more fussy at this time.
There's a small chance of a serious allergic reaction to a vaccine called anaphylaxis. It usually happens shortly after a person receives the vaccine and is treatable. Your healthcare provider will ask you to stay at the clinic for at least 15 minutes after a vaccination. This is so they can watch for abnormal or very rare reactions and treat them quickly. Vaccination sites should have a supply of epinephrine to use in case you have an allergic reaction.
Signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis may include an itchy rash, swelling of the lips, face, airway, tongue, or difficulty breathing. If you or your child start to experience any of these symptoms after a vaccination, inform the person who gave you the vaccine right away. That's it for now.
We'll be back shortly to discuss the power of vaccines,
what diseases we can prevent,
and much more.
Stay tuned.
Hey there, Broyden again. And for this next segment, I have a TED Talk to share with you about vaccines and about rumours. This TED Talk is presented by Heidi Larson, an anthropologist, and is also one of the founding directors of the Vaccine Confidence Project at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Larson also talks about how the first step to stop the spread of disease is to talk to people, listen, and build trust. So let's have a listen to what she has to say.
I study rumors, not tabloid gossip or the kind of rumors that are making stock markets crash or soar, but the kind of rumors that affect your health and the world's health, like eating a lot of garlic or drinking a lot of water is going to help protect us from coronavirus, if only. Rumors have a bad reputation. They're seen as not fact, wrong, or just a rumor. But I've studied rumors for years, and one thing I've learned is that they all have a story, and often an important story. One of the most moving or alarming rumor episodes that I investigated was in northern Nigeria. I was working with UNICEF's global immunization program, and it wasn't the rumors themselves that I found so alarming. It was the global impact of those rumors. The rumors were suspecting that the polio vaccine was actually a contraceptive. It was controlling populations. Or maybe it caused AIDS. No, maybe it's the CIA spying on them or counting them. I mean, why else would they have people knocking on their door again and again with the same polio vaccine? When children were dying of measles, no one was coming with measles vaccines. This wasn't about getting the facts right. This was about trust. It was about broken trust. Why so much distrust? It wasn't the mothers who were particularly distrusting, actually. It was the local leaders, the religious leaders, the local political leaders. It was the governor of the state of Kano who decided to boycott the entire polio eradication effort in that state for 11 months. Why such distrust? Well, it was 2003. It was 2 years after 9/11. And they were convinced that the West, and particularly the United States, was at war with Muslims. And they knew that the West, and particularly the United States, was a huge supporter and funder of the global polio eradication initiative. They had their reasoning. That lack of trust, that just a rumor or two, cost the polio eradication program $500 million to reset the clock, to regain the progress lost during those 11 months and beyond. The Nigerian strain of the polio virus traveled to over 20 countries as far as Indonesia. The cost of a rumor. The Nigeria episode was one of many episodes that I investigated when I was with UNICEF and earned the title of the director of UNICEF's fire department. At that point, I realized I never really had enough time. I was too busy putting out the fires and not enough time to understand what was driving not just the individual episodes, but why was there an epidemic of these happening around the world? I left UNICEF and went back to research, applied research, and I set up in 2010 what I called the Vaccine Confidence Project at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I convened anthropologists, epidemiologists, psychologists, digital media specialists, and mathematical modelers. We set ourselves the task to investigate historic episodes of rumors and their impacts, from trying to figure out what were the early signals, what were the amplifying factors and the impacts. How did they get traction? So we could start to understand what we should be looking for, how we could help governments and immunization program be more alert and responsive to early signals of problems. It was an early warning system. In 2015, we developed a vaccine confidence index. It's a survey with trying to investigate to what extent do people agree or disigee that vaccines are important, they're safe, they're effective, they work, and somehow they're compatible with my religious beliefs. We've run this with over hundreds of thousands of people around the world, trying to get our finger on the pulse of confidence and trust, but also, more importantly, looking at when that trust goes up or down. Because we want to see when it starts to decline, that's the time to jump in, to get there before there's a crisis like the Nigerian one. We also set up 24/7 media and social media monitoring around the world, multi-language, listening for what's going on vaccine conversations, trying to pick up early concerns or changes in sentiment that we should be paying attention to. We've created an ecosystem of different types of information to try to understand what are the public thinking and how can we engage. We look for early signals. When we find one, we have a global network of collaborators in a number of countries who have more local intelligence in that setting to try to understand, is this signal misinformation or is something brewing that we should know about? In London, we have a bigger picture. We watch the swarms of rumors, not just traveling locally, but jumping countries. We've seen them jump from Japan over to Colombia, through Europe and around. They move. We live in a hyper-connected environment. One of the things that we found fascinating, and we've learned a lot in the last 10 years, this is our 10th anniversary. This didn't start yesterday, this rumor problem. And one of the things we've learned is in our global monitoring that Europe is the most skeptical region in the world. France won the prize, actually, by far. And actually, some of those rumors have traveled to other parts of the world. But we are trying to understand Europe. Why Europe? I thought the US was really had some of the most skepticism, but boy, I was wrong. And a political scientist, a colleague we work with, John Kennedy, he took our data from 28 European countries, and he looked at it and correlated it with political opinion polling. And what did he find? He found that people who were most likely to vote for a populist party also were the ones that most likely to strongly disagree that vaccines were important, safe, or effective. What did we learn? Vaccines cannot escape the political and social turbulence that surrounds it. Scientists were unprepared for this tsunami of doubt and questions and distrust. Why are vaccines so ripe for resistance? Well, we identified a number of things, but one, they're highly mediated by government that regulates, and sometimes recommends vaccines, or often recommends and sometimes requires. Big business makes vaccines, and neither institution, government or big business, are high in the trust ranks these days. And then there's scientists who discover and develop vaccines, and they're pretty elite and not accessible to the general public, at least the language they speak. Third, we're in a hyper-connected environment with social media these days, and people can share their unfettered views, concerns, anxieties, and worries, and find a lot of people that think the way they do, and think maybe their worries are worth paying attention to. And finally, vaccines touch every single life on the planet. What other health intervention, besides water, touches every single life? So if you're looking for something to disrupt, it's a perfect stage. People are asking all kinds of questions. They're asking, why are vaccines, and these are the kinds of things we're hearing in our social media, why can't my child have a personalized vaccination schedule? What's the wisdom of so many vaccines? What about all those ingredients and preservatives? These are not crazy people. They're not uneducated. They're actually worried mothers. But some of them have come to me and say, we feel ignored, we feel judged if we ask a question, and we even feel demonized that maybe we're part of some anti-vaccine group. So we have some listening to do. And maybe that's why last year there was research that found that in 6 months in 2019, online, this was with 100 million different users in social media, although the numbers of individuals who expressed in their online groups they were positive, as groups, the ones who were the most negative were recruiting the conversations in the middle that were undecided about whether they wanted to get vaccines. The highly negative, what we might call the anti-vaccine groups, were recruiting the undecided at a rate 500% faster than the pro-vaccine groups. 500% faster. They were more nimble, they were responsive, and they were listening. Most people believe that vaccines are good, and they believe in their importance. But that belief is under attack. We need to build in more opportunities for conversation. And there are ways to do it. It's not easy for some health professionals to have conversations where their authority is questioned. It's uncomfortable. And they're just too busy to listen to all these questions. But we need to do something about that because we're losing a lot of concerned parents that just want a conversation. We should get volunteers trained to sit in waiting rooms, to be on hotlines, to have online chat forums, to have chat boxes. We have an abundance of scientific information to debunk false rumors. That's not our problem. We have a relationship problem, not a misinformation problem. Misinformation is the symptom, not the cause. If people trust, they'll put up with a little risk to avert a much bigger one. The one thing that I want and I hope for is that we as a medical and health community have the moral courage and humility to productively engage, like Ethan, with those who disagree with us. I hope so. Thank you.
Once again, that was Heidi Larson, an anthropologist and one of the founding directors of the Vaccine Confidence Project at the London School of Hygiene and Topical Medicine. If you're just tuning in, thank you and welcome to another episode of A Sound Constitution here at CHLY 101.7 FM. So far we've covered the knowledge of vaccines from our community, the history of vaccines, as well as a TED Talk by Heidi Larson covering about how the best approach to regaining trust about vaccines is by opening up more space and time to have conversations about them. And now let's go back to our previous segment. But first, a quick fun fact before we get started.
Do you ever wish you could hit a refresh button for your brain? Research has shown that even a short 20 to 30 minute nap in the afternoon can boost your memory, helping you to remember what you've just learned and making it easier to recall later. Think of it as a tiny power-up for your brain. Resting for just half an hour can help your mind work smarter, not harder.
Welcome back.
Hey Trevor, how many different vaccines do you think are available?
I figured that I've received at least 15 different vaccines throughout my life. Being in nursing school, I had to make sure that I had been vaccinated for several different diseases and keep track of everything. Is there somewhere around 20 different vaccines available?
The World Health Organization states that we now have vaccines to prevent more than 30 life-threatening diseases and infections, helping people of all ages live longer, healthier lives. Immunization currently prevents 3.5 million to 5 million deaths every year globally from diseases like diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, whooping cough, influenza, and measles.
I never would have thought there were so many different vaccines. I imagine that depending on where you live in the world, you'll need different vaccines for diseases that we don't typically have in Canada.
Exactly. For Canadians, we would call these travel vaccines, and they vary depending on what countries you plan to visit. To start off, let's take a look at what vaccines are required here at home. Can you tell me what vaccines are needed for adults in Canada?
Some vaccines that are recommended for all adults are tetanus or influenza, while others may be recommended based on individual risk factors, such as age, travel, activities, underlying illnesses and occupations. For instance, if you're a healthcare worker, you'll need additional vaccinations.
Some of these vaccines are free, but some people have to pay for them, right?
Exactly. However, if you need vaccinations for work, be sure to check with your employer, as they may cover ones that aren't publicly funded.
That would be nice because vaccines aren't just for children. Vaccines protect you and those around you from vaccine-preventable diseases, and keeping up to date with your immunizations as an adult is the best way to protect yourself from certain diseases, and it helps you to stay healthy throughout your life.
As we get older, there are certain diseases that are more common or cause more serious illnesses, even for healthy adults. This is why additional vaccines are needed as we get older. Some adults may have missed one or more of their vaccines. They may need to catch up to get these vaccines now. If you have questions or concerns about your vaccination status, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider or pharmacist.
When you say catch up, is that the same as booster shots? I know sometimes people ask, if vaccines work, why do I need another dose later?
Good question. There are two main reasons. First, as we spoke about earlier, vaccines stimulate an immune response. However, some vaccines need multiple doses to build up strong immunity.
So the first dose introduces the immune system, and the next dose strengthens the response?
Exactly. It's kind of like reinforcing that immune memory. However, sometimes immunity decreases over time, so booster shots help remind the immune system how to fight that disease, which is why adults are usually recommended to get tetanus boosters about every 10 years.
And then there's the flu shot. Many people get it every year because flu viruses change constantly, so the vaccine is updated annually in order to provide protection against the current strain of the flu that is circulating that year.
There are also vaccines recommended depending on your age, medical conditions, or lifestyle, like shingles vaccines for older adults or HPV vaccines for younger adults.
According to the Government of Canada, due to the immune system weakening as we age, older adults are put at a greater risk for severe illnesses and complications from various diseases such as the flu, RSV, shingles, COVID-19, and pneumococcal disease. Because of this, it is recommended for older adults to be vaccinated for these diseases, as well as get their flu shot every year, and make sure that their routine vaccines are up to date for diseases such as tetanus, diphtheria, and whooping cough.
Now that we've covered the recommended vaccines for adults in Canada, let's shift our focus to a topic that many people have strong feelings about: vaccinations for children.
Parents naturally want to do what's best for their kids, and when it comes to medical decisions, safety is always a top concern. Unfortunately, vaccines have sometimes become the subject of debate, especially online. Childhood vaccines are designed to protect kids from diseases that can be especially dangerous early in life. For example, vaccines protect against diseases like measles, polio, whooping cough, and meningitis.
So, when is it recommended that children get certain vaccinations?
Parents often notice that childhood vaccines follow a specific schedule, and that is because HealthLinkBC has a recommended vaccination schedule that is designed based on when children are most vulnerable to diseases and when vaccines are most effective.
In Canada, vaccines typically begin around 2 months of age and continue throughout childhood with booster doses. Children are recommended to receive routine vaccines at 2, 4, 6, 12, and 18 months in age. By 18 months old, children will have received up to 16 different vaccinations for 15 different diseases if this schedule is followed completely.
And some vaccines are also offered in schools, right?
That's right. In British Columbia, grade 6 students can get the HPV vaccine, and grade 9 students can get the meningococcal quadrivalent conjugate vaccine and the Tdap, or tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis vaccine, and these are publicly covered.
Children may also be offered other vaccines if they have not had all the doses of the recommended vaccines for which they are eligible. School programs like this improve accessibility to vaccine services and ensure more children are protected.
Now that we've discussed what vaccines are recommended for Canadians of all ages and when we should receive them, what other times might Canadians need to receive vaccines?
Another time vaccines become important is when you're traveling internationally. Here's why.
Because different regions have different endemic diseases that are not common at home, when traveling outside of Canada, you may be at risk for vaccine-preventable diseases such as yellow fever or malaria.
Oh, okay. So that is why travel health guidelines recommend checking vaccination requirements before you travel, because some destinations may require vaccines like yellow fever, typhoid, or hepatitis A.
Do I always need to get vaccines if I'm leaving the country, though?
No, not always. The vaccinations that you will need depend on various factors, such as where you plan to travel, planned activities, the length of your trip, and other individual health or risk factors. And sometimes countries actually require proof of vaccination before you enter, such as proof of yellow fever vaccination that is documented on an international certificate of vaccination or prophylaxis.
Which is why travel clinics usually suggest planning ahead. Ideally, contact your healthcare provider or a vaccination clinic as soon as you know where and when you're going. This is so your body has time to build the appropriate immunity, and because in Canada, you can only be vaccinated at designated yellow fever vaccination centers.
Interesting. I didn't know that there was such a place. So we know that vaccines have the potential to completely stop an infectious disease from occurring anywhere in the world. Thanks to vaccination, there hasn't been a single case of naturally occurring smallpox in the entire world since 1977. But despite this evidence, anti-vaccination movements have gained attention in recent years. Can you tell me why that is?
Social media and misinformation have played a role in spreading concerns about vaccine safety. One consequence of lower vaccination rates is that diseases that we thought were under control have started to return. For example, measles outbreaks have reappeared in several countries due to declining vaccination coverage.
This shows how important community immunity, also known as herd immunity, which is preventing the spread of disease to those around us, can be in protecting vulnerable populations.
So if someone wants to get vaccinated, where can they go?
In Canada, there are several options. Pharmacies now offer many vaccines, including flu shots and some travel vaccines, and public health clinics are another major option.
Family doctors and nurse practitioners can also administer vaccines, and local health authorities like Island Health provide immunization services in communities. There are also services like HealthLinkBC where people can call or check online for reliable health information.
So, before we wrap up this segment, we've talked a lot about various vaccines that people should receive. We've broken them up based on the reason that they are given, such as for childhood disease protection, or what may be needed as an adult or world traveler. But another way that vaccines are classified is based on the type of vaccine. You may have heard people mention things such as live vaccines or mRNA vaccines before. There are 6 different types of vaccines, the 2 most common being inactivated and live attenuated vaccines, and the newest being a messenger RNA vaccine.
Inactivated vaccines use the killed version of the germ, but they don't provide immunity protection that is as strong as live vaccines. They often require more frequent booster shots to maintain ongoing immunity. Is that right?
Exactly. An example of this would be most flu shots. The other most common type is the live attenuated vaccine, which uses a weakened form of the germ that causes the disease. Because those vaccines are so similar to the natural infection that it is trying to prevent, they create a strong and lasting immune response. An example being yellow fever or the chickenpox vaccines.
mRNA vaccines were talked about a lot during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, they were. It stands for messenger RNA, and scientists had actually been researching this technology for decades before the COVID-19 pandemic. mRNA vaccines actually teach our own cells how to create antigens for specific diseases. These antigens are then seen as foreign material for which our bodies develop antibodies towards. Once our cells create these antigens, the same immune process that we learned about earlier occurs. It is important to note that mRNA vaccines do not alter our own DNA. mRNA does not stay in the body for very long. After it has done its job of teaching cells to make the antigens, the cells break it down and it leaves the body as waste.
mRNA vaccines have the advantage of being able to be produced quite quickly in comparison to other vaccination methods. Currently, this type of vaccine exists for COVID as well as RSV, and there are clinical trials underway for numerous other mRNA vaccines.
So today we covered a lot, from how vaccines work and why boosters matter, to vaccines for adults and travel, and the importance of childhood immunization, and we also introduced different types of vaccines.
If you're looking for reliable information about vaccines, good places to start include public health agencies, your healthcare provider, and resources such as HealthLinkBC. And if you're unsure which vaccines you might need, talking with a healthcare provider is always a great first step.
Thanks for listening.
Hi, Chika. Thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. My name is Broyden, and with me today I had Kira and Trevor to bring awareness to vaccines, what they are, and the science behind it. We hope that what we had discussed today has been useful and valuable to you, and may help you with future decisions when it comes to being vaccinated. Don't change that channel just yet, however. Stay tuned just a little bit longer to hear from another Sound Constitution team member about what to expect in next week's episode.
Coming up on the next episode of A Sound Constitution, we will be exploring auditory health. We will speak with a local audiologist, have a look at different kinds of headphones and earbuds, and, of course, talk about the infamous Q-tip. One particular farm animal will also be featured, but that's all I can share for now. We hope you tune those ears of yours in next time, right here on CHLY 101.7 FM.
Check out our show notes from today's episode on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify at A Sound Constitution CHLY 101.7 FM for details, references, and more information about today's show, including our commitment to truth and reconciliation and what's coming up this season. We'd like to remind our listeners that the information presented on this program is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you missed any part of today's episode or would like to listen to this or past episodes, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify at Sound Constitution. Otherwise, we'll see you all next week.